Today I'm going to tell you a story so brutal, it silences the heart set against the unforgiving dust and heat of the Old West. It unfolds in a land where law arrived late and mercy often didn't arrive at all, where one moment of compassion could spark a war between survival and cruelty. It all began with a single sound in a quiet barn, small, desperate, and powerful enough to change the fate of everyone who heard it. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The sound that tore through the barn wasn't a scream so much as a breaking. It split the heavy Kansas heat like something alive being ripped apart. When Garrick Holt shoved open the stall door at Miller Ranch, the horse he'd come to see was nowhere in sight. Instead, a young woman lay collapsed on the packed dirt, her whole body shuddering. Straw quivered beneath her as if a hard wind were running through it. Her legs were forced wide frozen there, and every desperate attempt to draw them together sent a violent jolt through her frame, sharp enough to wrench another cry from her throat. Garrick stopped cold. He'd known battlefield damage bones snapped clean men stitched together with little more than faith and luck. But he had never witnessed suffering like this, someone breaking in silence, hidden in a barn, while the sun outside carried on as though nothing was wrong. She tried to prop herself on one elbow. The effort barely held. Her voice splintered when she spoke, thin and dry. I can't close my legs." The words gave way to another cry, not from embarrassment, but from pain that had settled so deep it lived in her breathing. Garrick lowered himself onto one knee beside her, careful not to rush, not to touch. He didn't want to startle her. What he saw made his jaw tighten dark. Bruising along the inside of her thighs, skin rubbed raw and swollen red, old rope burns biting into her ankles. Marks left by force, held too long by someone who had broken her open piece by piece. She tried to hide herself with shaking hands. "Please don't leave me here," she begged. "It hurts. I can't move." Something heavy sank into Garrick's chest. This wasn't chance. This wasn't a fall from bad footing. This was cruelty drawn out, deliberate, done by the very man who should have kept her safe. He set his hat on the ground and kept his voice low. "Ma'am, my name's Garrick. I won't hurt you. Let me see what's wrong so I can help." She nodded faintly, barely there, her words thinning to a whisper. "My name is Mercy," she said. "Please, take me away from here." Garrick leaned in closer, steady as stone. He slid a hand beneath her leg just enough to check for blood. The instant his fingers brushed her skin, Mercy Vale cried out and clutched his shirt with both hands, gripping like someone about to slip beneath water. That was when he understood she'd been lying there for hours, maybe longer. Heat poured off her swollen flesh, the dangerous kind that spoke of infection already setting in. Garrick Holt had never been a man to turn his back on suffering. He wasn't about to begin now. He glanced toward the ranch house. Empty, quiet. No sign of the husband she'd mentioned, no sign of anyone who cared whether she lived or died. He looked back at her. "I'm getting you out of here," he said. "I promise." Her eyes widened, fear and hope wrestling inside them. "Sir," she asked, her voice shaking, "if you help me, will trouble come after you too?" The question landed hard, like thunder settling in his bones. Garrick knew the answer. Trouble was already on its way. Mercy clung to him as if he were the last solid thing left in the world. Her breathing came short and ragged, every attempt to move drawing a hiss of pain from her lips. She couldn't stay in that barn another minute. So Garrick slid one arm beneath her shoulders, the other under her knees, and lifted her as gently as his strength allowed. She gasped, not in fear, but in relief. He carried her out into the blazing sunlight, her head resting against his chest, her fingers still knotted in his shirt. For a brief moment, she narrowed her eyes at the open prairie, as if the world beyond that black stall had slipped from memory. The wind touched her face, a warm summer breath, and that simple thing broke her. Tears came again, quiet and unsteady. Garrick Holt eased her onto his horse, keeping her balanced while she struggled to sit, without letting her legs brush together. "Easy now. I've got you," he said, his tone level and sure, the kind of calm a man earns only after years that grind the softness out of him. She looked down at him. Fear was there, plain as day. But something else flickered beneath it, a small, stubborn spark hope testing the light. Garrick swung up behind her and braced her with both arms so she wouldn't slip. With each hoofbeat, Mercy Vale drew a steadier breath. Every jolt made her wince, but she didn't complain. Not once. She leaned back against him and whispered, "You really are taking me away?" He nodded. "Yes, ma'am, and we're not turning back." The ride stretched on for hours, long enough for the sun to slide west and wash the plains in gold. Garrick spoke now and then, nothing heavy. The weather, the land, old stories about horses he'd broken years ago. Nothing sharp, nothing that made her pull inward, just enough to keep her awake and push back the fear that kept trying to crawl up her spine. When Boone Ranch finally came into view, Mercy was trembling with exhaustion. White fence lines, red barn doors, the low sound of cattle drifting from the far pasture. It all felt unreal, like stepping into a life that belonged to someone else, a life where the air didn't hurt and voices didn't rise in anger. Garrick carried her inside and called for Althea Grimshaw, asking for warm water and clean linens. Mercy tried to apologize for being a burden. He shook his head. "No, ma'am, not even a little." He said it so simply she believed him. For the first time in years, she let herself rest. As her eyes closed, one thought clawed back into her mind. Her husband, Travancore, would come looking. The question hung heavy. What does a cruel man do when he learns the woman he broke is gone? And what will Garrick Holt do when that man rides into Boone Ranch? Mercy had been there only 2 days when trouble finally found them. Garrick saw the dust first, a long, thin ribbon lifting beyond the fence line. A rider moving fast, and not the friendly kind. Mercy was resting inside, propped with pillows Althea had packed with fresh cotton. Garrick stepped out and shut the door behind him, not wanting her to hear the anger rolling toward the yard. Travancore rode straight in like he owned the place. He hauled his horse to a stop, jabbed a shaking finger at Garrick, and shouted, "Bring my wife out here. Now." His voice cracked like a rifle shot. Garrick didn't flinch. He'd been working cattle since he was 15. Yelling had never rattled him. But the way Dreven's eyes burned, the way he spat the word wife, like it meant ownership, lit something hot in Garrick's chest. Dreven dismounted and stormed closer. "You took her. You stole her from me. I'm taking her back myself." Garrick kept his voice even. "She's hurt. She's terrified," Garrick said. "And she came with me because she chose to leave." Travancore curled his lip. "Chose that woman belongs to me. She does what I tell her." Those words shoved Garrick past whatever line he'd been holding. He stepped in close. "Not today," he said. "She doesn't, and she never will again." Draven slammed a hand into Garrick's chest. Garrick drove one back harder. Draven swung wild rage, leading his fist, and caught Garrick just beneath the eye. Skin split, vision blurred. Before Pike Holler and the other hands could close in, a shout tore from the barn. Flint Yarborough came running, yelling that Garrick wasn't standing alone. That was all it took. Draven charged again, throwing punches with more fury than aim. As the hired men rushed from behind, Garrick ducked, seized Draven by the front of his shirt, and smashed him into the side of the water trough. Wood cracked, water sloshed over the rim. The hired hands jumped in, but Garrick and Flint moved with purpose. Years of ranch work had packed strength into them these boys hadn't reckoned on. Garrick dropped one man flat into the dirt. Flint hauled another back by the collar hard enough to draw a howl. Garrick turned as Draven staggered up red-faced and shaking like a fighting rooster. Garrick caught him by the collar and hauled him close. "If you come near her again," he said low, "you'd better bring a preacher and be ready to say your last words." Draven backed off, rage-boiling fear winning. He spat in the dust, swung into the saddle, and rode off, shouting that it wasn't finished. Garrick stood there as the dust settled, chest heaving. He knew it as surely as the ache under his eye. The fight had only begun. Inside the house behind the closed door, Mercy Vale had heard enough to start shaking. But this time, it wasn't only fear. Someone had finally stepped between her and the man who'd broken her. And now she knew the real storm was coming. Draven rode away that day, but the dust he left never truly settled. Garrick felt it. Mercy felt it too. The air hung heavy like the whole ranch was holding its breath. That evening, Garrick sat at the kitchen table with a mug of black coffee, staring down at the scarred wood. His thoughts kept drifting to Mercy in the spare room, warm now, safe for the moment, and how easily that safety could be torn apart if Draven returned with the law at his back. At last, he rose, grabbed his hat, and said, "Althea Grimshaw, keep an eye on her. I need to see an old friend." The ride into Dodge City took less than an hour. Garrick pushed his horse hard, harder than a man his age should, but he knew how to make an animal fly. The sun was sinking when he tied off outside the sheriff's office. Inside, Sheriff Roan Maddox sat behind a desk, buried in papers. He wasn't reading a word of them. He looked up the instant Garrick stepped in. "Well, now," he said, "that's a face I only see when things have gone bad. Sit down before you fall down." Garrick sat jaw clenched tight. Roan listened as he laid it all out, every bruise, every mark, every word Draven had barked from the saddle. The sheriff leaned back, chewing the inside of his cheek the way he did when he was fighting to stay calm. "What that man did is a crime," Sheriff Roan Maddox said. "Plain as daylight. But you know how things run out here. The law doesn't always land where it should." "I know," Garrick Holt answered. "But I'm not sending her back. Not while I'm breathing." Roan nodded, slow and thoughtful. "Then we do this the right way," he said. "We get Dr. Ansel Reed to put his findings in writing. We track down anyone in Abilene who ever saw Draven Core lay a hand on her. We bring Mercy Vale in when she's strong enough to speak. And we put it all in front of Judge Cormac Hale before Core gets there first." For the first time that day, Garrick felt a little of the weight lift. Not gone, but lighter. He stood and shook the sheriff's hand. "Bring her tomorrow," Rowan said. "I'll make sure the judge hears you both." Tomorrow never came. The hearing was postponed. The judge wanted more statements, more witnesses. So for the next 2 weeks, Garrick rode hard between Abilene and Dodge City, knocking on doors, collecting letters, pressing neighbors for the truth. He even begged the doctor to come twice to check on Mercy again and again, writing down every detail each night. When Mercy asked if anything had changed, Garrick told her to hold on just a little longer. When he stepped back onto Front Street one evening, the sky had gone purple and the lamps were flickering to life. Back at Boone Ranch, Mercy sat upright in bed, waiting for him, her hands twisting in her lap. "Is he coming back for me?" she asked softly. Garrick knew better than to lie. This fight was only starting. What happens when a judge in Dodge City must choose between a cruel husband and a woman brave enough to stand against him? The morning of the hearing, the courthouse felt colder than any winter Mercy could remember. She sat beside Garrick, hands clasped, tight breath, trembling like a leaf, refusing to fall. Dr. Ansel Reed spoke first, then Tobin Crow from Abilene, then Enoch Slade, who told of nights when Core's shouting scattered chickens across the yard. Draven Core was nowhere to be found. The law hadn't laid hands on him yet. At last, it was Mercy's turn. She rose slowly, legs unsteady, but her voice carried clear to every corner of the room. She didn't speak of pain. She didn't name the darkest nights. She spoke of wanting peace, of wanting safety, of wanting to close her eyes without fear. When she finished, even Judge Hale sat silent for a long moment. Then he cleared his throat and spoke the words that changed everything. Mercy would receive a temporary order of protection. Draven Core was to stay away from her and from Boone Ranch. A full hearing would follow once more witnesses were gathered and the law had time to find him. It wasn't the end, but it was the first real step toward one. The room felt brighter, lighter, almost sacred. Mercy sat down and let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding for years. Garrick met her eyes. Nothing needed saying. Some truths speak for themselves. Months passed. Mercy helped first in the kitchen, then in the garden, then among the horses as her strength returned. In the evenings, Garrick found himself watching her laugh with Althea Grimshaw, listening to her hum while she folded laundry, and he understood something quiet and certain. She was healing, and so was he. One crisp morning, Mercy woke early, pale and lightheaded. Althea smiled the knowing smile of women who've seen life turn before. That afternoon, Dr. Reed confirmed it. Mercy Vale was carrying a child. When she told Garrick Holt, he went completely still, as if the words had struck him square in the chest. Then he lowered himself into a chair, hard, like a man who'd had the breath knocked clean out of him. She feared she'd upset him. But then a quiet sound escaped him, a low, disbelieving laugh. He scrubbed at his eyes and said softly, "Well, I'll be. Look at that. Life still finds a way." For Mercy, it was more than a child. It was proof she had never been ruined. Proof that gentleness could grow what cruelty never could. Somewhere out on the open prairie, Draven Core eventually heard the news that she was expecting. He stopped cold. The thought stunned him that she could carry life after all he'd done. His face tightened, twisted between regret and a hard, burning anger. He muttered that it wasn't finished. But far from him, Mercy felt something she hadn't known in a long time worth. The quiet certainty of being deserving of love. Real love. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that stays. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blaze the trail. Subscribe, share. Leave your thoughts in the comments and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you. Aviso legal/disclaimer. These stories are crafted purely for entertainment and may contain imaginative additions or dramatic interpretations inspired by old frontier eras. We use AI-based resources, voice imagery, and drafting as part of our creative process. But every final detail is carefully reviewed and shaped by human effort to preserve emotional depth and authenticity. We strictly follow YouTube's rules regarding AI-generated content and refrain from deepfakes, altered identities, or misleading representations. All images, sounds, and related materials are lawfully obtained. Please do not reuse, modify, or distribute any portion of this content without written permission. Thank you for valuing creativity, respect, and original work.